What if Series 13 had been 10 episodes instead of just 6? What if The Timeless Children had been the absolute final end of Gallifrey? And what if the 13th Doctor had gotten a sequel to the Tsuranga conundrum focused entirely on the Pting? Believe it or not, all of these things were planned before circumstances changed everything. To find out how we went from all of that to the era we got, let's talk about the original plans for the 13th Doctor. When new Doctor Who showrunner Chris Chibnall contacted Jodie Whittaker at the end of 2016 to ask for a meeting, the actress assumed they would be discussing the upcoming press tour for the final season of Broadchurch. But the showrunner wanted to ask Whittaker if she was interested in auditioning for the role of the Doctor, a part Chibnall had decided should, for the first time, be played by a woman. Jodie Whittaker has said she didn't even realize she was being lined up for Doctor Who at first. What started as a casual conversation about future plans quickly turned into Chris Chibnall asking if she'd consider auditioning for the role, and it didn't take her long to say yes. Jodie said she read specifically written scenes that jump between different emotional tones, and even had to film a self-tape performing deliberately over-the-top sci-fi dialogue. She described setting up a very DIY scenario at home using her phone and whatever props she had. According to executive producer Matt Strevens, they did consider several actresses for the role, but Whittaker stood out almost instantly. Both he and Chibnall kept coming back to her performance, to the point where the decision felt obvious. In fact, they've said that the idea of casting a woman quickly became irrelevant in their minds. They weren't thinking about making a statement. They were simply choosing the best person to play the Doctor. And for Chibnall, it ended up being one of the easiest casting decisions of his career. Before the announcement, bookmakers' favourites for the role of the 13th Doctor included Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Tilda Swinton. When referring to whether the new Doctor would be a woman, Chris Chibnall was originally quoted in February 2017 as saying, "Nothing is ruled out, but I don't want the casting to be a gimmick, and that's all I can say." But behind the scenes, Chibnall had already made up his mind. He always wanted a woman for the part, and Whittaker was their first choice. And this was my reaction to Jodie Whittaker's casting back in 2017.
Oh, my heart's actually pounding. Oh, heck yeah. That does look like female hands. No! It's the Broadchurch girl, no way.
I remember that day like it was yesterday, but it's coming up on 10 years now. 10 years. Fuck. The 13th Doctor's era was supposed to include several stories that never made it to screen. Ed Heim had an early idea in the first writer's room for Series 11, called Safari. The storyline was set in a former military compound, which had been turned into a safari lodge on a war-devastated planet that was home to the Blocks, a rare life form that was a tourist attraction. The story was shelved for Series 11 in early 2017 because Heim had decided to write It Takes You Away instead, before transforming the Safari idea into Orphan 55 in 2018.
Billy! Billy, where are you? Oh.
I feel sorry for the dude, I truly do. I can't imagine writing It Takes You Away, one of the best Jodie Whittaker episodes, and then following it up with Orphan 55, which is the lowest rated episode of Doctor Who on IMDb. That's gotta sting. That's gotta sting. You should have stuck to Safari, man. Chris Chibnall wanted to write a sequel to the Tsuranga conundrum called Ptings. Yes, an entire episode focused on those tiny, adorable, spaceship-eating little cuties. Chibnall revealed this in an interview with Who Corner to Corner, confirming that the Pting were meant to return. But we were robbed. Hashtag bring back the Pting. Then there's the story that jumped showrunners. Inua Ellams, a huge playwright with plays at the National Theatre, had been developing a Doctor Who episode with Chris Chibnall. Meanwhile, Russell T Davies independently saw Ellams play The Barbershop Chronicles and immediately felt he'd be a perfect fit for Doctor Who. It was only after making some inquiries that he discovered Ellams had already been working on an episode under Chibnall, something Davies hadn't known at the time.
I went and saw a play of his at the National Theatre in London, and something about it just made me think, oh, that man should be writing Doctor Who. And then it turned out I was right. I came out, I made inquiries, and it turned out he'd been developing a Doctor Who episode with my predecessor, Chris Chibnall. But I didn't know that. It was weird, I didn't know that.
That story was likely intended for Series 13, but didn't make it to screen during that era. Instead, it was reworked and eventually became The Story in the Engine, appearing years later with Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor. So in a way, Ellams' episode wasn't lost. It just took much longer and a more unexpected path to finally reach the screen, with a completely different Doctor than originally planned. Even the episodes that made it to screen went through significant changes. For the Saranga Conundrum, due to some troubled production, Pting creator Tim Price was unable to finish the script for the episode, leaving Chris Chibnall to do it by himself. Price is still credited for the creation of the Pting, but Chris Chibnall ultimately ended up making that story. For Demons of the Punjab, producer Matt Strevens offered Sacha Dhawan a role in the episode, but Dhawan turned it down for scheduling reasons. He would later accept the role of the Master without having to audition, with his incarnation first appearing in Spyfall. It would be strange if Dhawan had appeared in Demons of the Punjab first. The entire reveal of the Master in Spyfall would have had a different impact, with audiences recognizing him before the twist. Or behind the scenes, they would have just cast someone else as the Master, which would have been a real shame because Sacha Dhawan's Master is a real highlight of the Chibnall era for me. His Master reveal is one of the most shocking moments in the Chibnall era, but not as shocking as the amount of people that watch these videos that aren't subscribed. If you've gotten any value out of this video, please consider subscribing, it would make my day. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Now, rumor has it, the episode The Timeless Children was originally meant to signal the absolute final end for both the Time Lords and Gallifrey, but writer Chris Chibnall ultimately dropped that concept in light of Russell T Davies trying to do the same thing, only for Stephen Moffat to reverse it in The Day of the Doctor. Chibnall didn't want to go through the same cycle of destroying and restoring Gallifrey again, so he left the door open for future writers. Well, kind of. He did get rid of the Time Lords, I guess. The Master did kill all the Time Lords, allegedly. Allegedly. I don't think they're fully gone. I think Gallifrey will be revisited one day, but we'll see. Revolution of the Daleks was meant to end with a complete Dalek conquest of Earth, as a result of them killing most of the world's leaders. Ryan and Graham's departure was motivated by a need to help rebuild the planet. Instead of just wanting to stay on Earth for personal reasons, they would have been staying because the Earth genuinely needed them in a post-apocalyptic scenario. That's a much darker ending and would have fundamentally changed the tone of their exit. And for Flux Chapter 2, War of the Sontarans, the Sontaran leader was apparently meant to die by being thrown off a cliff. So I guess that episode would have ended on a cliffhanger. Oh man. Oh boy. Speaking of Flux, the biggest what if of the 13th Doctor's era is Series 13. Or rather, what Series 13 was supposed to be before the pandemic changed everything. Chris Chibnall told Radio Times magazine, basically, for the past 6 months, we've been going, how do we make Doctor Who in the middle of a pandemic? How do we reintegrate absolutely everything? We couldn't do Spyfall this year. We won't be able to do overseas filming. Editorially, production-wise, logistically, health and safety-wise, it's had a massive impact. The original Series 13 was changed due to the pandemic, requiring massive production alterations. Ed Heim and Pete McTighe were commissioned to write untitled episodes for the original series that never happened. Ed Heim could have had his redemption arc. He really could have had his redemption arc, damn. A pirate-themed story was allegedly planned for an episode of Flux, but ultimately didn't happen. This element was reworked into Legend of the Sea Devils for 2022, the second lowest rated episode on IMDb, I believe. Ay. When Doctor Who announced that Series 13 would be shorter than usual, executive producer Matt Strevens stressed that this wasn't about lowering expectations. Instead, the goal was to maintain the show's usual scale and quality, despite the challenges of filming during a pandemic. They wanted to make it feel just as big, polished, and timeless as any other season. Cutting down the episode count was ultimately a practical decision, allowing them to concentrate resources and keep production values as high as possible. Chris Chibnall echoed that uncertainty was a constant constraint during production, with the situation changing week to week, but creatively, the aim remained clear: to deliver a form of escapism. He saw the series as a chance to give audiences something uplifting during a difficult time. I actually spoke to Jamie Magnus Stone, the director of The Halloween Apocalypse, War of the Sontarans, and Village of the Angels in 2022, and here's what he had to say about it.
It was quite weird, actually. It was so early on in the pandemic that there wasn't mass vaccinations yet, and we were all, I think everyone was still trying to figure out protocols and ways of working. There was nothing standardized at the time, so it was kind of a mixture of daily testing and splitting up into these kind of cohort groups so you didn't mix with more people than you had to. Everyone wore masks on set, and there was some restrictions in place, like you couldn't have more than 5 people in a room when you were filming out on location, I think.
So we'll never truly know what the full 10-episode Series 13 with overseas filming would have looked like. We know it would have been bigger, more globe-trotting, and potentially less serialized. But the specifics of those lost episodes remain a mystery. But truly, I really admire Flux and what they did for us back in 2021, because it was a form of escapism, so it is one of my favorite series because of that. Whilst planning the 2022 specials, Chris Chibnall Chibnall had planned for the 2022 New Year special to be set aboard a bullet train moving through space. When it was realized that they would not have enough time to allow the production team to build the set, he wrote Eve of the Daleks as a replacement. A version of the original train idea appeared as the opening to The Power of the Doctor. So that spectacular opening is actually a remnant of a completely different episode. And against all odds, Eve of the Daleks ended up being really good, one of my favorite Whittaker episodes for sure. The Power of the Doctor went through several significant changes too. Tom Baker was allegedly approached about appearing along with the other classic Doctors, though he turned out to be unavailable. Imagine the 4th Doctor appearing alongside the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Doctors in that sequence. It would have been incredible. The official BBC release of the script revealed numerous scenes that were cut or changed in the final release. The Master was supposed to turn out to be the actual historical Rasputin, not just inhabiting his body or pretending to be him. And the regeneration scene was supposed to have the Doctor end her speech with, "I bet it's going to be brilliant," instead of "tag. You're it." The decision was made in the editing room by Chibnall to swap the lines, and I personally think it works better. You can also see in the script that there's no mention of David Tennant popping up at the end, just a fade to black. David Tennant's half of the regeneration scene was filmed 7 months after production had wrapped on that episode, which is absolutely crazy. The 13th Doctor's era was shaped by more than any other by external circumstances beyond anyone's control. A global pandemic forced an entire series to be reworked, the elimination of overseas filming, and scrapping stories that had already been planned. But through all of that, we got the first female Doctor. We got Yaz, Ryan, Graham and Dan. We got Flux's ambitious serialized storytelling under impossible circumstances. And we got proof that Doctor Who could survive anything, even a global pandemic. The 13th Doctor's era may not have been what was originally planned, but I'm happy with what we got. Thank you for watching and be sure to subscribe for more of Doctor Who's Untold Stories. And click that video, I'm sure it's alright, maybe. I don't know. Bye.